This is the incredible story of Larry Bird's rookie year with the Boston Celtics, 1979-1980. But here's a little background first. Bird was drafted number 6 in the 1978 draft. This was a year before he was to enter the NBA. He still had to play his senior season at Indiana State. This is another case of Red Auerbach outsmarting every other GM in the NBA. The 5 players taken ahead of Bird were Michael Thompson, father of Clay, Phil Ford, Rick Roby, who would be a future teammate and the man who was traded for Dennis Johnson, Michael Ray Richardson, and Purvis Short. During his senior season at Indiana State, Bird led the Sycamores to an undefeated season. They eventually met up with Magic Johnson and the Michigan State Spartans. This would spark a rivalry that would last for over a decade. At the time, the game had the highest television ratings of any basketball game in history. Even though Indiana State was 33-0, the Michigan State Spartans were much more talented, and they took the national title game 75-64. As we know, Bird and Magic would go on to be 2 of the most influential players in NBA history. The Celtics had big shoes to fill at small forward. Franchise legend John Havlicek retired after the 1978 season. It's actually mind-blowing to me that Havlicek played with Russell in the 60s and then missed Larry Bird by just 2 seasons. In his final season of 1977-78, Havlicek had a solid year. He averaged 16 points a game and was named to the All-Star team. Even with Havlicek, the 77-78 season was a flop. The Celtics finished 30-52. The next season, they finished 29-53, and then Bird came to the rescue. The 79-80 Boston Celtics won 61 games, the greatest turnaround in NBA history, a record that stood until 2007-2008, broken by the Celtics with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. Their roster to me is the most interesting and weird in NBA history, and I'll explain why. The first man up is Dave Cowens. Dave Cowens was the MVP of the NBA in 1972-73. He was a fantastic rebounder who gave 150% every game. He also did some very strange things, like he got a job as a cab driver in Boston during the offseason one year. And sometimes he would sleep on park benches at the Boston Common, just for the heck of it. This was an older Dave Cowens, but he had a productive season, averaging 14 points and 8 rebounds a game. And who couldn't mention Nate Tiny Archibald? Archibald finished 3rd in MVP voting in 1972-73, losing out to future teammate Dave Cowens. The speedy guard of the Kansas City Kings averaged 34 points and 11 assists a game. When he went to the Celtics, he was more of a role player, but he also finished 5th in the MVP voting this year. This was an older Archibald. He had lost some of his legendary quickness, but he hadn't lost anything when it came to basketball IQ, and he meshed really well with Larry Bird. He, like Dave Cowens, was a former superstar, but he took a backseat because they recognized the talent of one Larry Joe Bird. This one is really interesting to me, and that's Pete Maravich. Now, this is not the Pete Maravich of the 70s, the guy who was averaging close to 30 points a game. He averaged over 40 points a game in college. He only appeared in 26 games for the Celtics, but here's an interesting tidbit. The 1979-80 season was the birth of the three-pointer. Pete Maravich attempted 15 threes that year, and he hit 10 of them. And this was to be his final season in the NBA. Despite Maravich's brilliance, his teams before this lacked talent. He carried Atlanta and Utah for much of his time there. Then we had Cedric Maxwell. Maxwell was a versatile forward that could play the 3 or the 4. Maxwell is interesting because he's still heavily involved with the Celtics organization. He is the radio voice and color commentator for the Celtics. He was later traded for Bill Walton, and Walton joined the 86 Celtics. And then there's Rick Roby. Roby was an okay player, but he was eventually traded for Dennis Johnson in a very lopsided trade. Roby was Larry Bird's best friend and a decent player. Then we have Chris Ford. Chris Ford is interesting because he would eventually coach the Celtics, and he's known as the first player in NBA history to score a three-point basket. And here is, if you haven't seen it, the first three-pointer in NBA history. This team had several future head coaches, including Larry Bird, M.L. Carr, and Don Chaney. This team did not feature Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale. They would join the Celtics the following season in a very lopsided trade. Bird was Rookie of the Year this season, and he was fourth in MVP voting, only to Kareem, Julius Erving, and George Gervin. As previously mentioned, Tiny Archibald finished fifth in the MVP voting. Interestingly enough, he was tied with Dennis Johnson. Magic Johnson finished second in Rookie of the Year voting to Bird. He already joined a good team that featured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The Lakers had the number one pick this year due to a terrible Gail Goodrich trade years earlier. Magic and Bird were rivals in college, now they'd be in the NBA. This would be one of the greatest rivalries in the history of sports, and certainly one of the most storied. Both men didn't have love for each other, but a healthy respect during their careers. Magic Johnson had the last laugh this season, though, and in the 1980 NBA Finals, Magic, the starting point guard of the Lakers, started at center, as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was too injured to play. The Lakers secured a championship victory over the 76ers. Magic was the MVP of the series. In this deciding game, Magic tallied 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. The point guard playing center. I'll say it again. The Celtics, on the other hand, lost to the 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals in only 5 games. The next season, 1980-81, Bird would secure his first title. They defeated the underdog Houston Rockets, and Cedric Maxwell was named MVP of the series. Bird didn't shoot well, but he averaged 15 points and 15 rebounds during the series. Bird's rookie season was a glimpse into the future of the NBA. One of the NBA's greatest all-time players had one of the greatest rookie seasons as well, and that's not surprising to anyone.